They thought they could get away with it. A group of cruel teenagers believed they could torment an elderly black man and face no consequences. Their target was not only the man himself, but also his pride, the flourishing garden he had devoted years to nurturing. What they failed to understand was that this garden wasn't just a collection of flowers. It was a sanctuary, a symbol of his endurance after a life of struggles, including years of dedicated military service. They thought he was powerless, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. The late afternoon sun bathed the modest home in a golden hue, casting long shadows over the lush, vibrant garden that surrounded it. The yard was a masterpiece. Rows of marigolds, towering sunflowers, and delicate lavender swayed gently in the breeze. Passers-by often slowed their steps, admiring the beauty and the meticulous care it took to maintain such a haven. The house itself, though modest, held history within its weathered shutters and peeling white paint. Despite the years it had endured, it radiated warmth and dignity, much like the man who lived there. Sitting on the porch in an old rocking chair was Samuel Turner, a retired Army veteran. His dark, calloused hands, hardened from decades of work and sacrifice, rested on his knees. To Samuel, this garden was more than a hobby. It was his therapy. After years of witnessing destruction and death in the military, tending to his plants gave him a sense of purpose. Here he could nurture life, a stark contrast to the chaos he had once known. As he leaned back, the rhythmic creak of the wood filled the quiet evening. In the distance, the sound of children's laughter broke the silence. Samuel turned his head to see a group of boys playing basketball near the street corner. He recognized them, the Bennett brothers. They were new to the neighborhood, but their presence had already disrupted its peace. The three brothers were loud, brash, and disrespectful. Shortly after they had moved in, Samuel had introduced himself, offering a basket of ripe tomatoes from his garden. Their mother had accepted them politely, though distractedly, but the boys had barely acknowledged his kindness, offering only half-hearted responses. Since then, he had watched them roam the streets, leaving behind litter and a trail of mischief. At first, their behavior toward him had been subtle, snickers as they passed. His house, whispered remarks and pointed fingers. Samuel had brushed it off, attributing it to youthful ignorance. But soon, their taunts turned into acts of deliberate destruction. Crushed flowers, broken stems, and trampled plants became a regular sight in his garden. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a sudden loud thud against the house startled him. Laughter followed, cutting through the stillness. Samuel hurried to the window and saw the Bennett boys standing in his yard. Their basketball rolled across the grass, crushing a patch of daisies. He stepped onto the porch, his towering frame silhouetted against the warm glow of the house. "Get out of my yard," he said firmly. Jaden, the eldest, smirked. "Relax, old man. It's just some flowers." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "Those flowers aren't yours to destroy. Leave. Now." For a moment, the boys hesitated. The youngest, Malcolm, looked uneasy, but Jaden's mocking grin remained unchanged. Finally, with a dismissive shrug, Jaden turned and walked away, his brothers reluctantly following. Samuel watched them disappear down the street before stepping into his yard to assess the damage. The crushed flowers felt like a personal attack, each broken stem a reminder of the blatant disrespect he faced. The next morning, Samuel rose early, as was his habit. The world was still and quiet, the air cool with dew. As he worked to repair the damage in his garden, the sound of soft footsteps caught his attention. He looked up to see a young girl standing at the edge of his yard, clutching a small pot of flowers. "Hi," she said hesitantly. Samuel straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Hello there. Can I help you? The girl shifted nervously. I brought these for your garden. I saw what my brothers did. I'm sorry. Samuel's stern expression softened. What's your name? Maya, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Well, Maya, those are beautiful flowers. Would you like to help me plant them? Her eyes widened in surprise, and after a moment she nodded. Together, they found a spot in the garden. As they worked, Samuel shared stories about his plants and the memories tied to them. Every plant here has a story, he explained, patting the soil around the new flowers. Just like people, they need care and patience to grow strong. Maya looked thoughtful. Do you think people can grow strong even if no one takes care of them? The question gave Samuel pause. He set down his gloves and met her gaze. Sometimes they can, he said after a moment, but it's much harder. Before Samuel could say more, a sharp voice rang out. Maya, get over here. Samuel looked up to see Mr. Bennett storming toward them, his face dark with anger. Behind him, the Bennett brothers lingered, their smirks sending a chill through Samuel. What are you doing over here? Mr. Bennett demanded. She was helping me plant a flower, Samuel replied calmly. Mr. Bennett's scowl deepened. Stay away from my kids. Mind your own business. Teaching kindness isn't interference, Samuel said, meeting the man's glare. Jaden kicked a loose stone toward the garden. Nice flowers, he sneered. Samuel didn't flinch. He stood tall, watching them retreat. Maya cast a quick, apologetic glance back at him before following her father. The harassment escalated in the days that followed. The boys vandalized Samuel's garden further, scrawling hateful messages on his fence. Samuel knew he couldn't stay silent. He began knocking on doors, rallying his neighbors to stand together. While some were hesitant, afraid of confrontation, others agreed to support him. They drafted a letter to the Bennett family, demanding accountability. When the letter was delivered, Mr. Bennett exploded with anger. But then, Jaden surprised everyone. We've been acting like jerks, he admitted, his voice trembling. I'm sorry. The crowd fell silent, stunned by his admission. Even Mr. Bennett seemed taken aback. Samuel stepped forward, his voice steady. Acknowledging the harm is the first step. The next is making amends. Jaden nodded, his gaze dropping to the ground. Maya stood beside him, her small hand resting on his arm in silent support. That evening, Samuel returned to his garden. The damage was still there, but so was the potential for healing. Kneeling in the soil, he began to plant something new, a symbol of hope and renewal.